It's one of the reasons why entrepreneurship probably isn't for everyone because it is very all-encompassing. It becomes very much part of your life, and you have to struggle to find a work-life balance. And sometimes your family and your friends don't appreciate it, but that's the way it has to be, particularly in those beginning years.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nuske. I'm on the line with Ken Colwell. How are you, Ken?
I'm doing great. How are you, Rick?
I'm wonderfully well. It's early morning here. It's late in the day there.
That's right. Yeah, that's
So,
home after a long day of work.
Oh, yes, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. For everybody who's on the call with us today, we're going to be talking about Ken's quick start guide to business. And before we do that, Ken, what we normally do is give you the opportunity to share a little bit about yourself. Would you mind talking about yourself with the My Future Business audience so they have a bit of context?
Sure, absolutely. So I am currently the dean of the School of Business at Central Connecticut State University in near Hartford, Connecticut, in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But before I became a dean, I was an entrepreneurship professor, and I used to run the entrepreneurship program at the University of Miami, down in Miami, Florida. And so I have a fairly long series of experiences working with entrepreneurs. And I've, during my time as being a professor, also done a lot of consulting with entrepreneurs and interacting with them. So I've started to think like an entrepreneur, and I've taught many, many people how to start businesses. So that was the impetus for the book.
That's fantastic. And it fits like a hand in glove for the My Future Business audience, given that that's our primary focus. So it's a wonderful opportunity to have you with us on the show.
Yeah, great. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, look, I'd love to circle back on that and we'll go into, I guess, some deeper levels about your guide and we'll talk about entrepreneurship in some detail. But given that you're a dean and that you're highly, involved with everything, do you get much time to have any downtime?
Well, this is my downtime for tonight, Rick. I'm spending it with you.
Look, I'm blushing.
I will tie this back to the book. I mean, one of the things we have a chapter about in the book is the work-life balance of an entrepreneur. And different people organize it differently. But the way I do it is I just don't separate my work life and my home life. They all blend into each other. So I work when I'm home and I do home stuff when I'm at work. And that works best for me.
It's one of those things as an entrepreneur, you're always thinking about it, aren't you? You're thinking about it in some sort of context. And I wonder, this idea of the work-life balance, is it somewhat of a myth? Because, you've either got the mindset of an entrepreneur or you don't.
Yeah, I think there is some possibility of separation, but it's one of the reasons why entrepreneurship probably isn't for everyone because it is very all-encompassing. It becomes very much part of your life, and you have to struggle to find a work-life balance, and sometimes your family and your friends don't appreciate it, but that's the way it has to be, particularly in those beginning years.
Yeah, I wonder about that if we talk a little bit about the impacts to families and friends. What is the approach that you talk about when you're talking to someone who wants to become an entrepreneur in this respect?
Well, what I say is they have to find something that works for them. I have a diagram in the book, and it's a triangle, and I didn't make it up myself. I don't know where I got it, though, so I can't cite anyone. But basically, it involves the three edges of the triangle are your work life, your home life, and your personal life. And the idea is you have to find some sort of balance. It doesn't have to be an equilateral triangle, but it can't be pulled totally in one direction either. So you can have, what are those different triangles called, isosceles or obtuse or whatever, but you have to find some sort of balance. And there's no one way to do it. And anyone who tells you there's sort of one way to organize your life, I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, a lot of the impetus for developing the My Future Business Show was for to accommodate those who are wanting to do things their way. There seems to be this thrust towards becoming solopreneurs, if you like,
Mhm.
but unfortunately, the statistics seem to be against us in many ways. Well, I don't know the exact numbers, but anywhere between 7 to 8 out of 10 business ventures fail. Could you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, it depends really on how you define failure.
Yeah.
And I think people who are very much have that entrepreneurial mindset don't see it as failure so much as a learning experience.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I think really gives an advantage to those of us in the Western cultures who are not culturally, we don't feel that same sense of shame over, a business failure the way people in some other cultures do,
Hmm.
because the failure is inevitable. And what you do is learn to roll from it, or to use some jargon, maybe pivot and find another business model that works better. Or you can just step back and lick your wounds, figure out what you did wrong, and figure out how to do better the next time. But entrepreneurs don't usually frame those things as failures.
It's funny if we can, go into that a little bit deeper, Ken. I remember in the workplace when I was working for a corporate, I actually mentioned to a boss at the time that I learned so much from the mistakes I made. I intend to have a few more each day. He actually got angry at me, and I
Yeah.
remember it vividly. So, there's a lot to learn from the mistakes, isn't there?
Well, I think there is no learning without the mistakes, and in fact, one of the things I often joke about when we have an entrepreneurial speaker in a class or at a group or something is if they haven't experienced that failure, they have no perspective, and what they think is that every good thing that's ever happened to them is due to their own brilliance. And of course, that's not the case. We
Hmm.
all have help from other people, and we're helped sometimes by good fortune and other things that happen to us. And I find entrepreneurs that have gone nowhere but up tend to have a little bit too much ego invested in their success.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to talk a bit about risk, this idea of risk versus reward. And with that in mind, how does one go about identifying something that they should get involved with as an entrepreneur? Is it easy to find opportunities, I guess?
Well, it's easy to find an opportunity because the opportunity has to come from within yourself. I
Yeah.
think the mistake people make is when they go out and they try to find what the hot thing is. They'll say, "Well, I need an app. Everyone's got an app, so I'm going to go into app development." Well, do you know how to code? No, I'm going to outsource that. So, what is your competitive advantage then? So you have to find the thing that you're passionate about and that you love. And that's critically important for entrepreneurial success because you're going to spend so much of your time doing it that if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
aren't really passionate about it, you're going to get discouraged and give up. So the opportunity has to be this combination of intrinsically what you know about and what you're passionate about, mixed with, obviously it has to be a good market opportunity as well.
I'm wondering about this idea of doing what you want to do versus doing what you have to do as an entrepreneur to get your venture up and running.
Mhm.
What's the sort of mindset that someone needs to take into this space if especially if they're coming out of a corporate environment where their mentality would be one of an employee?
Well, yeah, it's the mindset is completely different. And again, as I alluded to before, that's why it's not necessarily a lifestyle for everyone.
Mm.
So when you wake up in the morning as an entrepreneur, you can do whatever you want, right? You don't even have to
Yeah.
get out of bed if you don't want to. There's nobody looking at you. But obviously, if you don't get up and do things to move the needle, your business isn't going to be successful. So you have to have that intrinsic motivation to get up and get moving, and you have to have some sort of a plan or an organizational system that's going to allow you to know what you do and make sure you're not spinning your wheels. And that's very different than waking up, getting into the office at 8 o'clock, having a cup of coffee, checking your emails, and joking around with the boys at the water cooler, and pretty much whiling the day away until quitting time, and then you leave.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to touch on this idea of focus and productivity. We've just touched on this whole I guess this swanning around as an employee where, you get paid regardless. If it's going to be, it's up to me, I guess, is what we're focusing on with focus and productivity. How does someone, if they're on their own, stay focused and productive?
Well, again, you have to be doing what you love. And
Mm.
that doesn't mean you're going to love what you do all the time. So, for example, my wife owns a business where she does vintage resale, and she really loves the creative aspects of finding really good items and getting good buys that she can resell and everything. But she doesn't like the marketing aspect. She doesn't like social media and that sort of thing. She's not really good at using it.
Mm.
But she knows if she's going to be successful with the other things that she has to do the social media. So, even if you don't, it doesn't mean you have to like everything that you're doing all the time. But if it's fitting, if it's something you're passionate about and what you're doing is meeting the ends that you have, uh, then, it doesn't work. It just seems like what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, if we look at all of the moving parts in the business, and we're a solopreneur. You touched on it a little earlier about doing things that you love, but then this idea of outsourcing could be problematic. Is it something that you need, given that there's marketing, there's all these different moving parts of a business? Where does somebody start if they don't know what they're doing?
Well, they start by reading my book, Rick, and
Ah.
listening to your podcast. No, I really think that that is the case. There's a million resources out there, online resources. There's podcasts like yours that
Yep.
are very useful. There's a million books. I happen to think mine is unbiased, but I think mine is a great resource. But I think you start by doing that sort of work. The problem that you run into is at some point you've got to stop reading and start doing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sayings is, "We don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." So at some point we have to say, "I know enough. Maybe I don't know everything, but I know enough that I can just go ahead and get started and see what happens."
Yeah, that's wonderful feedback. Now let's talk about the guide. Let's dig deeper into this guide. What was the moment in time where you realized that you were going to put this together?
Well, as I said, I've been working now with entrepreneurs for the last 20 years, and I realized the combination of working with entrepreneurs who are trying to get to be successful as startups, or working at ones who are kind of at the knee of the curve and want to move to the next level of their business, and of course, working with all my students over the years, I realized that there's a set of questions that they all have, and similarly, a set of misconceptions that I think are propagated by the media quite a bit about who becomes an entrepreneur, who is successful as an entrepreneur. And, after a while, it sort of occurred to me that really I had an insight into it that is perhaps unique. And
Yeah.
so that's when I decided to write the book.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, let's talk about the content itself. Does it range from the basic fundamentals through to advanced stuff? What is the sort of content that we can expect to find inside?
Yeah, so, if I were to have written this book a decade or so ago, it would have been basically a business plan guide, right? Because everyone needed to write a business plan. And business plans are still useful, but that's now part three of the book. So part one of the book really goes into some of the things that we've been talking about, which is the mindset that you need, the cognitive aspects of entrepreneurship, what an opportunity is, how to think about risk, all those sorts of things.
Hmm.
And then in part two, we dig deeper into the strategic elements of starting a business, because as I said, the number one thing about being successful is having the right mindset and thinking the right way, but you still have to have a solid business opportunity that's going to make sense in the marketplace. So in part two, we talk about developing your value proposition and developing your business model so that you actually have a viable business in something that you're passionate about. And then in part three, we go into, if you do need a business plan because you're looking for funding or you want a bank loan or something like that, we tell you how to go ahead and put together all the pieces that you've been working on in the previous two parts and make a business plan out of it.
That's great. I remember entering a competition. It was a government-based competition, and part of this it was actually for a pet product that we had an idea for, Ken. And what it was is that we not only needed to have a prototype of this particular product, but we also needed a business plan. Now, we had a panel of judges, and it was quite stressful, this whole process. And this was like a I guess a fake sort of board, if you like, in terms of going to a bank and getting funding. It can be quite an overwhelming experience for someone who doesn't know how to put together a business plan, because these are the nuts and bolts types of questions that bank managers are going to ask you. So, does your book actually go into any depth about that side of the experience?
Yeah, it does. When you approach anyone who's interested in your venture, any type of potential stakeholder, whether it's a potential supplier, a potential employee, or a potential funder, as you're talking about, you have to have a toolkit. And to me, that's what the business plan is. The business plan is a toolkit. We're too used to thinking about it as this static document that you throw on someone's desk and say, "Yeah, this is my plan." But the toolkit starts with you need a good elevator pitch, right? When you
Yeah.
meet a potential investor at a coffee bar or at an event or something, you have to be able to very quickly and very succinctly be able to pull out exactly what it is that's special about your venture and get them interested in that. You need a deck. When they ask you to make a presentation, you need a series of slides, whether they're PowerPoints or Prezis or whatever,
Yeah.
to make your presentation. And going down the line, of course, you need the business plan, but beyond that, you need to have done the full due diligence process, because I guarantee, as you say, your investors are going to do it. So if you don't have the answers, you're going to look foolish.
I wonder if is there anywhere that people can get involved with this process in terms of role playing this whole scenario of creating a business plan. Is that something that you facilitate, or do you know others that do?
I can't say I have a specific resource for you. I do know that I have taken, over my time as a professor, I've taken numerous students to business plan competitions. They are always videoed and always put on the web.
Yeah.
So there are, whether it's YouTube or anything else, you will have no problem finding pitch presentations to look at. Now, I will tell you one thing not to do. Don't watch Shark Tank. I don't know, is it called Shark Tank in Australia or
Absolutely,
something different?
it is actually called Shark Tank, and I avoid it like the plague.
Yeah. The original show, of course, was English, and it was called Dragon's Den.
Yes.
Um, uh, Either way, that is not a realistic look at how investors operate, or the sorts of questions or the sort of presentation you're going to make. So look for the real thing. Don't look for don't watch it on primetime TV.
No, absolutely not. Now, I wonder, one of the things that is mentioned here is whether or not this book is timeless. Is this something that I can pick up in a year's or 10 years time and still have some content in there that I can apply to my own venture?
Yeah, I think so. I think any revision to it over time would be things such as the sorts of technology you need to know to get your business started. But the strategic elements and the cognitive elements, the mindset elements are things that are going to be persistent for any startup at any time. And I think will certainly stand the test of time. They're certainly no different in the 20 years that I've been involved with in the space.
Well, that's good to know for everybody who's listening that some of these fundamentals won't change. But Ken, I often think about the My Future Business Show and how we're serving, both online and offline businesses. With technology in particular, what have you seen that's come to the fore that's been the most prominent thing in your mind when you think about businesses?
Well, I mean, what's been different with the online aspect of businesses, even if you're not doing an online business per se, is how much easier it is to actually form and start a business than it used to be.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously, if you're going to do a brick and mortar store, you've got to get the conventional financing and site licenses, all the government stuff that you need to do. So that part is probably still the same. But for quite a few businesses that you can think of, you don't need any inventory because you can start drop shipping relationships from halfway across the world without ever meeting the people that you're doing business with, which means you never have to touch the merchandise. You never have to collect money. You don't have to do any of the standard things that a business would have had to do a few years back. It's all automated, and there's tools and apps for every single thing you can think of.
Isn't it amazing? This concept of the barrier of entry has almost been wiped out, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it has for most industries. Again, there are ones with high capital costs to get into. There are ones with government regulations that prevent you. But for the average person who wants to get out and sell a product or a service, you can do it in your local Starbucks on your phone.
I have this thought that if your business is even a bricks and mortar business, Ken, if you're not online, where are you? Is the question that I would have. If that is the case, and I think for the most part it might be, would you suggest that somebody have an online presence of some sort, even if it's just as a business card?
Oh yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that's where all of your marketing and advertising are going to go.
yeah,
Even if you take my day job in higher education, so for the most part we're providing a bricks and mortar service, right? Our students come to our classrooms and learn. But if somebody wants to learn about a business program in Central Connecticut, they're going to look online. They're not
yeah.
going to look on a billboard or anything like that. So all of our marketing has to be done online. And if you don't have an online presence, you might as well not exist.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? And I think now we have obviously a wide demographic of student ages, for the younger generation through to the older generation. Are you finding in your experience as a dean that you're having a lot of, I guess, offline business owners of an older age coming through the system now to learn more about
Um,
the online space?
Yeah, in my particular school, Central Connecticut State University is a state institution.
Yeah,
So quite a few of our students are the non-traditional type of students. They're usually not the sort of students that come here at age 18 and their parents pay for their tuition and that sort of thing. They're
yeah.
normally working their way through school, and they often have family obligations as well. So absolutely, when we're thinking about our business program and our entrepreneurship program, we have to cater to that non-traditional student.
Yeah, I wonder what is on your agenda, the curriculum coming up for you. Are you doing anything new? Do you have any plans for the next 6 months?
Well, in terms of business curriculum, of course, I think people need to be more entrepreneurial, and so I always push adding entrepreneurial elements. But the other thing I think that's very important in a business school is to make sure that our students really understand technology and how it's used in whatever business they go into. Just because, as we were saying, you may think, well, I have a dry cleaner, so I don't need to know about technology. But if you don't understand the web and how to market on the internet, your dry cleaner will not be successful. So regardless of the sort of business you go into, you have to understand the technology that basically is all around us and controls almost everything we do these days.
Yeah, it's omnipresent and it's not going away. Ken, if people want to find you, your wonderful guide, where are they going to find you?
Yeah, well, it's sold wherever fine books are purveyed, but
Of
of
course.
course, I think most of our sales take place on Amazon, so you can certainly find it there, or you can find it on my publisher site, Clyde Bank Media, or my own site, which is called innovativegrowth.co. So one word, innovativegrowth.co.
Well, that's wonderful. So, everybody who's listening to the call, as is normally the case, you will find the links to Ken and his wonderful book on this post. Ken, it's been an absolute treat spending some time with you on the My Future Business show today.
Well, it's been my pleasure to be with you. This has been a very interesting conversation, and I appreciate you having me.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, Then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.